You're listening to the Staging Sips podcast with Lori Fisher. This podcast is dedicated to helping real estate staging CEOs build healthy businesses that grow, flow, and thrive. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy that you're here, and I am so happy to be with you. So this week we are starting the first of a series about hiring. And today we're going to be talking about what you need in place to hire a new team member. But before we dive into that, I've got a little housekeeping. So at the time of this recording, we are going to be starting the Create Demand Workshop January 30th, 2023. So this week coming up. And it will be running every afternoon starting at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, if you haven't registered because you're afraid you can't make every day, I want to put your mind at ease. Register anyway so that you can get the replays. This will be amazing training if you are struggling at all with bringing in clients, booking your calendar out, like all that good stuff. We're going to be talking about the skill set and mindset behind creating demand. So if you're struggling at all, like wondering if your marketing strategies are the right thing and you find yourself confused about what your next steps should be and all that good stuff, this is the workshop for you. So you'll definitely want to get access to those replays. So I encourage you to register. And you can do that at rethinkhomeinteriors.com/create demand. And we'll put the link in the show notes so that you can go right to it right there. But definitely get yourself on that, on the enrollment list so that you can not only get the replays, but also we'll be opening up enrollment to Rethink You a little bit earlier to everyone who's in the workshop. And you'll have some special bonuses as a result of that. So get in there. Okay. All right. So that's my housekeeping. So let's dive in. So one of the things I had learned about myself in the process of this entrepreneurial path that I've been on the journey is that I really operate best when I have a structure and a container prepared. Like the process, it has been practiced before it's actually implemented. And I don't know if that makes total sense, but as an example, I will tell you for this podcast, I spent almost a year practicing and working on does the process look like to even record the podcast? Where should it go? How should it be uploaded? Who should do it before we actually started releasing episodes? So hiring was no different. And that was probably the first time I learned that I really like having the structure in place. So I was really, really nervous to put my first hire into place. And truthfully, in a staging business, hiring happens a lot earlier than you would think because our time gets leveraged really quickly. And so I was faced with having to hire an admin support and, kind of operation support because I was still doing all of the staging, but I was also getting bogged down in booking appointments. I was missing, people reaching out and calling until like the end of a day if I was on a vacant install. So it just was not ideal to be hands-on working in the field of staging while also trying to have a back office that was, very client-centric and, phone calls were getting answered in a timely fashion or return messages were getting returned in a timely fashion. But I was so nervous because I literally had never hired anyone before. So I really didn't know the process. So what I did was, thank goodness, I hired someone, a productivity coach who also worked with people on staffing and standard operating procedures to help me get myself organized and prepared to actually hire that person. And it took me 8 months of hustle bustle on the business side, as well as working through the process with the productivity coach before I was ready to make my first hire, which was super successful because she's still with me today, 9 years later. So anyway, so I'm going to help you do all of this too. I'm going to share with you some of the gems that she had given me in working with that productivity coach so that whether you've not hired yet, or even if you have hired some people, but you just want to refine your process, you'll get some insight into how we do it here at Rethink Home Interiors. So the first thing though, I want to say before we get into the real tactical things is that there are going to be some mindset things that likely come up for you as you're hiring. For me, I know the biggest thing that I had after I hired my admin, I really did need help on the staging side of the business because I was doing vacant staging work. So I was spending, 6 hours doing an install. And I just knew that wasn't really efficient, and I wouldn't be able to grow my staging business beyond my ability to do that. And certainly, I could do 3 stagings a week by myself, but it was going to be meant a lot of hustle between the pull and then the install and then the D stage and the restocking and all of that. I really was going to need that support. So my biggest mindset hurdle was that people would only want me on the project. And certainly that was true. I had repeat clients that really liked working with me and really didn't want to work with my other team members. So I did continue to work with those agents. It was mostly agents specifically that really only wanted me, while in the process launching my new lead stager, or I called her my assistant stager at the time, my assistant stager out to our new clients. And I never had an issue with anybody who was reaching out to us when I said, oh, I don't do our consultations. For example, I don't do our consultations. Our stager, Lisa, does. She handles all of those. She's excellent. And everybody's like, okay, great. I can't wait to meet her. I couldn't believe it because I had spent a lot of turmoil thinking people would only want me on the site. And now to this day, I don't do any of the work in our staging business. My team handles all of it. They do everything. And a lot of times clients don't even talk to me at all. And they, right from the very beginning, our lead stager now handles all of our sales calls. They get entered into our system through our administrative and back-end process, and they book that way and book with our team of stagers. So I, at this point, have passive income because we've gotten so good at hiring and training new team members. Okay, so that was the first mindset issue. A couple of things that are likely to come up when you start and you actually bring on a new hire that I think you need to be aware of. And the first thing is that hiring will slow you down in the beginning. This will stress you out. This is also important to know because you want to actually kind of think strategically about how many new hires you bring on at a time. I really like to bring on only 1 or 2 new hires at a time because I know that it's going to slow us down a little bit in the hiring process. We've gotten much more efficient on onboarding our team, which we'll talk about in another episode. But in general, when you first start hiring, you're going to feel like they slow you down. And especially if it's operational support and it's a role that you have been wearing, a hat that you've been wearing, you'll want to dive in and do the work for them. And I want to compel you and urge you to resist this because you really do need to let your new team member figure these things out. It might take them a little bit longer than if you were to do them yourself. But in the long run, it is going to be so much better for you as the business owner. Also, hiring is going to reveal all that you didn't plan for and all that you didn't document. You're going to spend some time preparing, and I'll talk you through some of it in a minute. You'll preparing standard operating procedures and documentation and things like that. But there's always going to be something that you have missed, some piece of information that is in your head that hasn't been put down on paper. And that's a good thing because each time that you bring on somebody new and they reveal this to you, you can get better again at defining your processes, documenting your processes, and all of that good stuff. Another mindset thing that might come up is that you need to hire before you feel like you're financially ready. That's probably one of the most important, is that you're going to look at it and you're going to feel like you're not financially ready to pay somebody to take over these roles. But I remember one of my first business coaches asking me when I was telling him that I was, thinking about hiring, but I was really stressed about the money and I was, booking appointments and doing all the things. And he said, well, let me ask you this, like, how much is your hourly rate? And I, told him, oh, well, it's like 150 an hour. That's what it was at the time. And he said, so you are paying $150 an hour for an okay administrative assistant who isn't getting back to clients in a timely manner, who has even forgotten to call people back for a couple of days, right? Like, so you're paying $150 an hour for a so-so admin. What if you paid an actual admin who will be far better at it, $25 an hour? Doesn't that save you money in the long run? And I was like, oh my God, epiphany. Yes. So, and you can always start slowly with any hire that you bring on. You can start like 10 hours a week, 5 hours a week, whatever it is that helps you get to a place where you feel like you're financially ready to do that. But that may come up. And in a staging business, that is very often the case, that you will need to hire stagers when you feel like you're barely profitable already. And that's obviously a whole other conversation. But in order to grow your business, if you want to serve more people, you are going to need support in your business. Okay. So that's all the mindset-y stuff. So let's talk about the nitty-gritty of what you need to have in place, in order to hire your team member. So the first thing is your hiring documents. You want to have prepared and ready your hiring documentation. Obviously, you want to think about what the role responsibility is and have those descriptions ready. So let's go back to the example of maybe operational support or administrative support. So what are the roles and responsibilities and characters and qualities of the person that you want for this particular role? And I say character and qualities because very often every team member, well, always, mostly, anybody who's client facing is a representation of your brand. So you're going to really want to make sure that you have that dialed in. So the ideal candidate will be, and you can fill in that, for me, it was somebody who has a great personality, is super friendly, uses exclamation points both verbally and non-verbally in their communication. They're caring, they're loving, they're responsible, they're conscientious, all of that. And then it was the nitty-gritties of here's what they will need to do. So in 5 to 10 hours per week, they will, answer the phones from this time to this time, right? Whatever the hours are that you want them working. And they will be filing, managing, sending out emails, all of that good stuff, right? So you want to put that together first. You also want to be thinking about including qualifiers. And this is great for when you announce a new role opening. So a qualifier or a filter is something like needs to have a valid driver's license, needs to have proficiency with using spreadsheets, for example, needs to be comfortable on ladders or using small tools to hang art and things like that. So, right, like you want to be thinking about can lift up to 50 pounds, lift or move up to 50 pounds, because you want to disqualify people in your hiring announcement who may not fit those qualifications, right? Okay. So that's the documentation that you want to have for the role responsibility. You also want documentation for the hiring process, like the application. You can simply use Google Forms. We use in our business an application. We announce that we're hiring, and the hiring link goes to our application. We have them fill out the application first because it's a little red velvet policy is what we call it. It is a way to have some homework for people to do before they actually get to move forward to having like a short phone call or an in-person interview with us and our team. So by filling out the application, they have to answer a series of questions about, experiences that they've had when, whatever, how would they handle this kind of situation? We also request that they take 4 free personality tests and then attach the results of those tests with the application. We do this because this actually has turned out to be one of the biggest hurdles. People don't want to do this piece of homework before they are applying for the job. This is very important to us because, again, for our forward-facing, client-facing roles, we really want to dial in on who is this person? And personality tests are an amazing way to parse that out. So this really helps you vet any candidates that move forward, because what you'll find very often in the beginning, and I used to do this, people would reach out and be like, oh, I'm just curious. I would love to know if you're hiring. Or I would say, oh, I'm hiring. And then I would end up on a phone call with somebody and they would be telling me that they can't work on during the week because they have a full-time job, but they'd be available on night times and weekends. Well, of course, we do not work on evenings or weekends. So I spent time on the phone with somebody who couldn't do that. Or I was looking for a part-time candidate. They were looking for full-time work, but I got on the phone call with them and we didn't find that out until there. So having your application and kind of your qualifying or vetting details in your hiring documentation really helps you begin to hone in on a really great candidate. You want to have interview questions prepared ahead of time, because once you find an ideal client candidate, you'll want to start interviewing them. So you want to have that ready. You'll also want to have W-2s or 1099s, depending on what role you're hiring for and how you want to categorize them. You'll want to have a confidentiality agreement, and you can have that made up through an attorney, or I would imagine there are probably templates for that. We have these inside of Rethink You. I share all of the ones that we have for our business that were all done by an attorney. So those are inside of Rethink You for all of the stuff I'm talking about today are in for our members inside of Rethink You. In addition to the confidentiality agreement, you also want an employee or contractor agreement to sign based on the terms of your employment agreement or your contractor agreement. So all of that is really important. So you want to have all of that prepared and ready so that when you get rolling, you have everything you need. Okay. So that's kind of the back end of just all of the documentation for your hiring. Next up, we want to be thinking about your calendar. Why do we want to be thinking about your calendar? Because structure is your friend when you're starting out. So I have spoken in all kinds of places, not on the podcast yet, about how to think about your calendar and organizing it. But one of the things you really want to do is identify the days that you have client appointments available and days that you don't, and time slots and things like that. And you want to get as dialed in as to when client appointments start, when do they end. The reason for this is when you are by yourself booking those things, if somebody says, "Hey, can you come at 9:15 on tomorrow morning?" You have the ability to be like, "Absolutely, I can totally do that." When you start hiring an admin to schedule you, they don't always know that you're willing to do that. So you'll end up having like lots of questions, like this person wants to, or you'll get things put on your calendar at all times of day, willy-nilly. And as you get busier, it actually becomes hard to keep track of your appointments when they start at all kinds of weird times. So one of the first things my productivity coach had me do was identify the days of the week that Rethink Home Interiors sees clients and when do those appointments start and end, so that I had a structure for every single day. And when I hired my admin, she knew, okay, our appointments run from 10 a.m. to 12, 12 a.m., 12 p.m., sorry, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. for a styling evaluation, and 1 to 3. They happen on these days of the week. Vacant installations, Lori likes to do those on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday so that Monday can be a pull day. Friday can be a restock day, like that kind of thing. So you want to create this. What does that structure look like for your business so that your admin totally understands your scheduling rules? And then also when you have new team, then it's very easy to tell them as they're working, here are the days and times that you need to be available for appointments. Okay. So that's one thing. Are there some scheduling rules that you have, right? So in our case, I always tell the story about how I had no scheduling rules. If somebody wanted to be on the calendar tomorrow, absolutely, that could be fine. If they wanted to get on the calendar in the afternoon today, I would do that. But that doesn't work when you bring on team at all. So one of the things that we implemented, because my first stager that I hired told me she was going to quit because it was too difficult always rearranging her schedule to make appointments work because we would put them on last minute. We put into place a 72-hour moratorium. So an appointment could not go on the calendar within 72 business hours. Actually, it's 48 business hours, so that it was always happening on the third day, so that our team had 2 days of time to know that they had an appointment on the books. This has worked out really, really well. Nobody has ever complained because truthfully, there are no real estate emergencies. And occasionally, do we have a client who reaches out to say, "Hey, we have this client. It's kind of a special circumstance. Can we, book this earlier?" And usually if we can accommodate it, which we typically can, we will do that. But it is usually the exception to the rule. So that is really important for you. So anyway, all of that to say that you want to dial in what that calendar looks like. When do you do pulls? When do you do restocking? What days do you prefer to do D stages if possible? At what days do you prefer to do installations? What days and times do you prefer to do consultations, whether that's styling evaluations, photo styling, if you do that, color consultations, all of that. You want to get really clear on what those are. All right. So that's great. Then that puts everybody on the same page in terms of scheduling. The next thing you want is for everyone to be on the same page in terms of access to information and access to workflows. So my productivity coach had me put into place a cloud-based filing system, first of all. So using Google Drive to store all of our documents. And this was genius, obviously, for so many reasons. I had been saving documentation to my computer, and thank goodness she converted me over to Google because my computer hard drive crashed at one point, and I would have lost everything that I had stored there. Plus, it's not accessible to your team if you're storing all of your documentation on your hard drive. So most of you probably know that. That's probably obvious. So I apologize if that's really basic, but I did not know that. So I thought I think maybe there's somebody else out there like me who really needs that direction. Save things to Google Drive. Create a group Google Drive for your business so that you can share documentation amongst your team. The other thing was using a cloud-based project management system. Like you could use Asana, or I think there's ClickUp or Airtable or something like that, where you can create your steps to all of your processes and start creating your standard operating procedures. This is really important, again, so that everyone has access to all the steps, all the processes at any given moment. And then it can be linking to all the other things that you have done in Google Drive. Those things work hand in hand. They really are two tools that you want to put together: your Google Drive along with a cloud-based project management system. So in our business, we've been using Asana forever. I love it. And inside Rethink You, you have access to our exact standard operating procedures for a bunch of our processes that you can just upload right into your own Asana and customize. It's like flipping amazing, if I do say so myself, because you're just basically taking our process, plugging it in and tweaking it to make it your own versus recreating the wheel. Kind of amazing. So one more reason to sign up for the Create Demand workshop and get into the Rethink You wait list so that you can gain access to that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about standing operating procedures while we're there. So this standard operating procedures are essentially the way you like to do things. So this is really important for any role that you have, because a lot of times people say, well, how are people going to know how to do it the way I want it to be done? Standard operating procedures offers you exactly that. It's getting your brain out onto paper. It's getting your process out onto paper. So the way that you start with a standard operating procedure is, like, I found it easiest for the things that I knew I was doing on a regular basis. So for example, a styling evaluation. I knew that for a styling evaluation, from the time of the appointment, when I had the appointment, I wanted to have what we call the selling success plan created and out to the client within 48 business hours. I did not want those to stack up, especially in the busy spring season when I was the only stager in the business. So I would get those done ASAP. Typically, I was getting them done right after the appointment if I had time to do that. So the first thing was, doing the appointment. And then we use something called Go Canvas, where we have, we're an app that we use that takes all the information for the selling success plan. So the next step is using Go Canvas to create the selling success plan. Next step, submit selling success plan to the seller, the realtor, and copy admin on the plan within 48 business hours. The next step is follow up with a slide dial call once you have submitted the plan and say this. And we put the script in for what we would say on that, just to let the client know that you had sent the report over. Okay. And then it's like 3 days later, this email goes out. 3 days later, this email goes out. And since then, we've automated the emails going out, but the original process was manually sending out these emails. And it identifies who is in charge of each thing. So not only are you documenting every single step of your process, including your supporting documentation, but we're also identifying who's responsible for it. So in Asana, we use tags to help us get that assigned out. You can also create a template where you have it assigned already. Like, so for example, our styling evaluation template or our standard operating procedure, we have tags for admin and stager in that. So when we are using that, we can quickly assign anything that has a tag stager to the stager who is doing the appointment, and anything admin related gets assigned to our office queen, Catherine, and it's done super quickly, super easily. So I want to make sure you get it assigned out. We also want the information about when does it need to be completed. Now in Asana, you can assign due dates and things. We also include it in our standard operating procedure if it's necessary, that within 3 days, this happens. Within 2 days, this happens. So that way, when it's getting scheduled out, if we are using due dates, Catherine knows what due dates to put in, but also our team knows, okay, 2 days after the appointment, I should be doing this. I should be following up with this, or that kind of thing. So super, super important to get all of that in. So it's the steps along with the supporting documentation, who needs to be doing and who's responsible for it. When does it need to be done? Okay. Those are kind of the big things. Now, when you get into this, don't get too overwhelmed and overthink it. Start just even with the basics of your first standard operating procedures, because these are going to be living and breathing documents. They are going to change over time. And like I said before, you're going to learn where there are gaps in your standard operating procedures. You're going to learn where things aren't really clear and maybe they aren't happening the way you think they should, or you find a better way. Like I had said, we originally had manually sending out certain emails. Well, then we figured out, oh, geez, we could use our email list, our CRM, which was in episode 16, how to use an email list. We figured out how to use our email list in order to automate those things. So we were able to remove those things. So these are living and breathing documents. So you just want to get started. This is truly the way that you are going to duplicate yourself, amplify what you do in the world, and be able to serve a lot more people seamlessly. So these key things are what you need to get in place. So the first is hiring documentation. Well, first of all, get your mindset right. Hiring documentation. Make sure your calendar is clear, all of your calendar rules. Get a cloud-based filing system going, get a cloud-based project management system set up, and then start documenting your standard operating procedures for the role you want to hire. The more you can do all of this and get that ready to roll, the better it will be when you start bringing on your new clients. So next week, we're going to be talking about how to get the right client, the right team member. Did I say client? Team member? How to get the right team member, how to find that person, what are the things that you can do to make that happen. We'll dive a little bit further into the application process that we use at our business, and then how to onboard them effectively. Okay. So that's the sip for the week. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next week. Talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Staging Sips podcast. If you love what you've learned here today and you want to learn more about how to market and grow your staging business more strategically, I would love to see you join us inside of the Rethink You mentorship program. If you want more details and get on our waiting list, you can go to rethinkhomeinteriors.com/waitlist. Looking forward to seeing you in the classroom.